Welcome to the Do You Ever Wonder podcast. Ever find yourself wondering about the world's biggest topics? Join your host, Mike Haltman, CEO, board chair, and all-around deep thinker, as he dives into real estate, investing, national security, self-improvement, dating, networking, finance, and so much more. Expert guests, real conversations, no limits. Hit subscribe and get ready for insights, surprises, and conversations that will make you think. The Do You Ever Wonder podcast starts now.
Welcome, everyone, to the Do You Ever Wonder podcast. And if in the intro I talk a little bit about that we cover dating, and actually today is kind of appropriate for that. Our guest is Katarina Polonska. Welcome, Katarina.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Katarina, you're a high-performance relationship coach. You used to deal with business and interpersonal relationships for high achievers at work, and now you've pivoted to where you're dealing with high achievers more on their relationship front. And I find that fascinating. So, just off the top, do you find a lot of high achievers have issues in their interpersonal lives?
100%. I mean, if you look at the data, founders and entrepreneurs have a 72% chance of getting divorced, right? There's something
like 25% more than the average.
Yeah. And there is something to be said. It's kind of twofold, right? There's the personality type that becomes a high performer. And I know that with myself and kind of my own history and my own background of being very kind of quote unquote high achieving, and the different challenges that I experienced in relationships. I've seen it with my parents, I've seen it with my peers. This all unfolded very organically. I at no point when I was doing my master's degree was I thinking, I'm going to go on to become a relationship strategist. I'd never thought that.
Right.
It was very much an organic process. And yeah, in terms of kind of the twofold element, there's the personality type. There's also the very real structural context of what it means to become a high achieving, high performing professional. Time commitments.
So in first of all, your journey, it's complicated. Talk a little bit about that. I know you've dealt with some serious issues. You've dealt with breaking an engagement. Talk a little bit about that. How has that led you to become what you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. There's kind of like a three-pronged background to all of this. On an academic level, I've always been interested in relationships without even realizing it was relationships I was interested in. I found myself studying, love and even the philosophy of love and the experience of love and what is it, and grief and loss. And this was something I don't know why, but I mean, it could be my Russian heritage, very melancholy, but I was very interested in this stuff. And when I came to my undergrad, I actually ended up specializing in looking at, bear with me, disenfranchised white American blue-collar masculinity and its limitations in terms of the model of manhood. And I continued that inquiry into my master's degree, which I did at Oxford, and really specialized again in kind of masculinity and femininity and gender dynamics, and where do traditional gender roles actually fail? Like, what are the kind of the limitations of them, and what is the new evolution of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman in that kind of gender identity sense, and looking at communication and conflict and mental health and all these different areas. So that was kind of the academic side of things. I ended up specializing in masculinity because I found it so interesting. And, when I looked around at my own life, I didn't see very many happy men. I just didn't. And tracing back, this is kind of veering to the personal side of my life now, veering back to, my first ever boyfriend, very tall, handsome, quote unquote privileged from a nice background, British guy who ended up having a complete crisis of identity, sense of loss, real sense of disenfranchisement, ended up joining the army. And that was devastatingly sad because, I could kind of see him feeling lost and not knowing where to go. Trace that forward to other relationships, to my first ever engagement, and seeing this continuous theme of wonderful men not knowing what their role is in the world, not knowing what it means to be provider and protector if your partner's actually earning more money than you, right? Because that was my story. My story was that always been high achieving, always been high performing, straight A student, Oxford scholarships, blah, 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 promotions, run my own company, making more money than my partner, right? So there was this kind of this, I guess, imbalance.
So is
And
that's a typical male insecurity that would affect the basis of a relationship?
yeah, and I would say, that is very specific to the Anglo-American context. I'm not speaking for other cultures.
Hmm.
Um, but specifically, within kind of North America, within the UK, even parts of Western Europe, that is very much the trajectory that I saw a lot of men on. Also, a lot of women struggling to navigate this. Am I too masculine? Am I threatening him? What am I doing that's actually contributing to this problem? And that was, again, my point of inquiry, because my first engagement didn't work out.
Hmm.
And I shouldered a lot of that blame and responsibility of what was my role within this. And then you kind of trace that to the professional side of things. So I've been in behavioral science for a while now, and I was studying as well a lot of where does well-being fall short? Because I started in the corporate space. I started out looking at companies and looking at well-being, looking at high performance, looking at productivity, all of these different things. I've got cats in the background.
I see
A
that.
kittens running around.
Yeah.
And in looking at that, it became very clear to me just how many people feel disempowered and how many people feel anxious and how many people feel stressed in the workspace. And as my career in behavioral science began to move me closer and closer to coaching, which, funnily enough, I'd actually got my first coaching qualifications in 2007. My father's in the coaching space, so it's very much the world I've grown up in. But as I grew closer to the coaching world on a professional level, and then veered off to create my own business, which was never meant to be a business, it was a sabbatical. I just wanted a hobby that would, chip in some funds. It was never meant to be what it is now. As I began coaching people, working with them one-on-one, and really tracing what is the origin point of their anxiety? What is the origin point of their stress? Why are so many brilliant, high-performing, high-achieving, intelligent people struggling with this kind of almost like depression? It became clear to me that a lot of it's relationships, if not the overwhelming majority, it's their relationships, both their relationship with themselves. Because if you're a high performer and you're powering through and you're working and you're jumping through hoops, unfortunately, there's going to be an element of self-abandon, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just
Yeah,
is.
absolutely.
So the relationship with the self was quite fractured. And that, of course, would bleed into relationships with others, most notably their romantic relationships, whether it's that they're single and unable to meet someone, whether it's that they are married and their marriage is suffering, whether it's that they've been through multiple divorces, whatever it might be. There was this real picture of it is lonely at the top. It is lonely at the top. And that's ultimately what kind of brought all these things together. And here I am now. I work with probably 70-80% men in high performing positions. I do work with women as well, and help them navigate that and solve for the problems there.
So can you talk a little bit about the attachment theory? I know that,
Yeah.
I think that sets the foundation for who we are. I know, when I look at the three aspects of it, potential ways that you grew up, I definitely see that I was in one of the danger zones.
Mm.
And I'm just curious, what area do most of these people fall into, or it just varies?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I've noticed pretty significant trends. So for those, before I even kind of go into the attachment theory, it was Gabor Mate, I believe, that said entrepreneurship and really kind of any C-suite position is a trauma response, right? It's a trauma response insofar as somebody who is very secure, their nervous system is regulated, they're very balanced, they are very healthily attached to themselves, but detached from, money and aspirations and ambition because they don't frankly need it.
Right.
They're quite unlikely to pursue these types of positions. And, and I say that as someone who's been an entrepreneur twice in my life. My husband's an entrepreneur, so I know it well. When we look at the traits that drive a lot of these very ambitious, hardworking behaviors, they are rooted in what I mentioned earlier, self-abandon. And so for those people that don't know what attachment theory is, very high level, it is a way of understanding the different, I call them subconscious blocks, that we develop in our early formative years around our relationship with ourselves and others, how we attach to ourselves and our role in the world and other people.
And
And
the other people specifically would be your parents.
exactly, your primary caregivers. And between the ages of 0 and 8, your brain is very spongy. You're taking in the world around you. You don't really have your own discernment. That sponginess actually continues right through to about 12-ish. And then you begin to form your own identity, begin to kind of be able to decide for yourself what you want to believe and what you don't want to believe. But really, your brain is taking in that world around you and drawing conclusions on your role within it. And so what I find is if we kind of simplistically say that there are 4 attachment styles, you've got the dismissive avoidant. Those are people who typically experienced emotional neglect growing up. And that would have been from the perspective of perhaps they were really smothered. Perhaps their parents were really overbearing. Perhaps their parents were really controlling and telling them what to do and telling them where to go in life and even picking their university choices and whatever it might be. They then grow up with this suspicion of intimacy, suspicion of connection, because it hasn't been safe historically. It hasn't let them have their own identity. And that has fueled within them a sense of being innately powerless and innately helpless because someone else has already been dictating the terms or negating their emotions and negating their experience. They haven't felt heard, they haven't felt seen. They feel like there's something wrong with them because they've been constantly corrected and told what to do. And so guess what? Those people very often become CEOs, become founders, because not only do you get to be independent, you don't really have to have much intimacy, right, when you're in that position at the top, but you also get a lot of power. And if there's a fundamental belief internally that I am powerless or that I'm weak, which isn't going to be conscious. So even if I'm saying this and people are like, what is she talking about? I don't think that at all. It's very deeply embedded. That will be driving a lot of that very ambitious, hardworking behavior. So, I've worked with a couple of billionaires who, in theory, they have all the power. They have so much power. They have so much freedom, but they still have that internal blocker.
An empty hole.
Exactly. And it's never going to feel like enough because it's that subconscious driver, and our subconscious mind is 95 to 97% of our brain. So it's never going to feel like they've arrived because it's an internal conditioning problem rather than an external reality problem.
I went to a psychologist and, he said that a lot of people assume that when they achieve a certain level of wealth or a certain level of power, that they're going to be happy. And then when they achieve those things and they're not happy, where do you go from there? How
Precisely.
do you, what's the path out to happiness? If you don't go to somebody like you, or you don't, how do you resolve that? Or do you just live unhappy?
Well, I think that's a great point that you've made, because if we look at so many of the ultra wealthy people right now, it's very clear to me they're not happy. And, when we look at the scandals, and even, what's happening, not to be politically affiliated in any way, but like what's happening with Trump, what's happening with a lot of the kind of the histories of a lot of these people, it's a power play, right? It's almost like, well, I have so much money, and money doesn't even mean anything to me anymore. How else can I wield my power? How else can I satisfy that internal craving to feel dominant, to feel like I'm actually strong? Because internally I feel desperately weak, right? And again, it's all subconscious. So I find that a lot of dismissive avoidance tend to become the CEOs, really the people at the very top. Beneath, when we think about perhaps other C-suite professionals, VPs, anyone in the executive team, I often actually find fearful avoidance, which is an interesting trend. And what is a fearful avoidant? A fearful avoidant is a hybrid of anxious and dismissive. So maybe I'll move to what the anxious attachment style is. An anxious attachment, which is what I ultimately used to be, are people who experienced some form of abandonment. So it's another form of neglect, but some form of abandonment in their earlier years. Now, that doesn't have to be literal abandonment. I grew up in a nuclear family.
Emotional.
Absolutely, emotional abandonment. My emotional abandonment was very much that both my parents were working. They were both PhDs. My mother was working really hard. My father was traveling a lot. They were trying to provide for the family because they loved us, but they were absent, right? They were absent for a lot of the time. And when they were present, they were either stressed or worried about money. And so that became the blueprint for my reality. And the beliefs that I formed were, well, I'm somebody who happens to be alone. I'm someone who's going to be potentially abandoned. And the reason for that must be, because children like to have an egocentric sense of conclusion about themselves, the reason must be that there is something wrong with me, that I must be not good enough. I'm not doing a good enough job as being a kid. And maybe I'm a bad kid. And so because of that pattern, because of that subconscious belief inside of me that I'm somehow bad, I'm not good enough, I'm going to be alone. Guess what? I started jumping through all the hoops, being the best A-star student that I could to prove that I am in fact great, that I'm good, to prove that I'm good enough, to prove that I can get appreciation, I can get connection. But the irony here, and this is kind of the final thing, so on the anxious attachment, is that our subconscious mind becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The brain needs congruence. So whatever I believe about myself, I have to create or see externally, right? So if I believe that I'm somehow alone or abandoned, and I believe that I'm not good enough, not only when I'm getting the straight A stars and the scholarship to Oxford, am I going to feel like, well, this still isn't good enough, I can still do better, right? I need to do a PhD now, whatever it is. But I'm actually isolating myself, because in becoming such a fierce high achiever, I am lonely. A lot of people didn't want to be my friend, right? It was very threatening.
Right.
And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so what I find a lot of anxious attachments, they become kind of the lone wolves. And so, and they're often quite needy, right? I was extremely needy in my previous relationships. I was very much a lone wolf. I didn't love teamwork because I've kind of grated on me. I found everyone like too slow for me. You know, I wanted to move and go faster, and I wanted to jump through the hoops even higher. And in the end, here I am, an entrepreneur. I now work alone, but I work in the realm of connection. So it's kind of interesting. And then the fearful avoidant is a hybrid of the two. So typically characterized by that avoidance. So, you know, not having that emotional neglect growing up, but also having strong fear of abandonment. So they often become very senior leaders in companies. But what really characterizes a fearful avoidant is a strong sense of betrayal, of paranoia of being betrayed, because their childhood was typically very volatile. It was neither dismissive nor anxious. It was kind of a hybrid of the two. And it kept changing and being different. And a fearful avoidant grows up with a real strong sense of nothing is what it seems. Everything is changing. One day my parents are nice, the next day they're yelling at me. One day this is happening, the next day this is happening. So this volatility creates this hypervigilance, which actually makes them very charismatic people, because they're very good at reading the room and adapting and shape-shifting to meet the needs of whatever's required of them. So they become excellent leaders. Interestingly, you know, a lot of our politicians are fearful avoidance.
I have a question for you. So,
Go for it.
you know, you've detailed how an overachiever becomes that. You know, growing up, I was smart growing up. I had skipped grades, but I had a very poor childhood. My parents had gotten divorced. They hated each other. The house was miserable, blah, blah, blah. And I became, you know, a subject of their unhappiness. And so, you know, how does low self-esteem fit into the process? Or do you not really deal with people who are suffering with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say low self-esteem is the symptom of any insecure attachment style, right? So what is secure? Secure is when you don't really have any of these troubles growing up. Your parents are quote unquote as perfect as can be. You grow up feeling very safe, very loved, very accepted, very wanted. You are good enough. You are a good kid. You know, you're very secure. Lovely way to be. Not many people are like that around. And those people are absolutely not grinding away doing 12-hour days, right? They're probably at home with their family and kids having a wonderful time over dinner. And so if you didn't have that, which I would argue the majority of us haven't, at least, you know, people on LinkedIn that I find, if you haven't had that, then you're going to have a low self-esteem, right? And that low self-esteem is going to manifest in different ways. It might manifest that nothing ever feels good enough. And so you keep working because you come from a scarcity. You didn't have enough money. I mean, this is absolutely my wiring. I did not have enough money growing up. I had a very, you know, I grew up in Eastern Europe with communism collapsing. So money for me was a foreign concept. It was, you know, obviously I was very young, but it was still very much this kind of strange, uncertain, you know, the rug's been pulled out from under our feet because suddenly housing is no longer free. Like the stuff isn't free anymore. Like now I have to work for it. You know, there was a lot of trauma there. And so that became my low self-esteem, that I'm poor, that I don't have enough.
Okay.
And I have to somehow grind and prove my worth, but it's never going to be enough, which is why
your low self-esteem about money created the atmosphere that drove you to succeed.
Absolutely. But I will say, I had to clear that low self-esteem around money in order to succeed. Because what happened, and I see this time and time and time again with my clients, if you have what I call these money blocks, simply put, your own subconscious conditioning around money that's rooted in scarcity and fear and anxiety and not enoughness, it doesn't matter how hard you work, you will, on some level, subconsciously self-sabotage. So I was the queen of doing 12, 14-hour days throughout my 20s. I was not making money, right? I was extremely dependent and codependent on other people. And it boiled down to some of the choices I made. It boiled down to, on a subconscious level, some of the companies that I even worked for, right? It kind of boiled down to these very subtle behaviors. And it was only when I really got to grips with the anxious attachment, with the money blocks, and began diligently shifting them on that subconscious level that my income exploded. And I tell people there was literally 1 month when it became very clear to me, and it was in 2022, and I started clearing the blocks. It takes 21 days to recondition your brain, right? With like one block. I got a 70% pay rise in a corporate job. 70% pay rise in a corporate job
Now,
overnight.
is that because you cleared your block
Absolutely.
and then you were able to, how did you execute that kind of a raise? It
Yeah,
wasn't them noticing you, it was you being proactive because you had cleared
absolutely.
something.
Absolutely. I cleared the block. My self-esteem grew, my confidence, my faith in myself grew, my awareness of my own abundance actually grew. And so in that month, I took action. I scouted out other roles. I discovered other roles were being paid more in other companies. I applied for other roles. I got an offer. I got kind of tentative offer. It wasn't a full offer. I double bluffed my company. I told them I had another offer. I didn't have another offer. They were like, not much we can do. We'll give you a 20% pay rise. That's it. I was like, that's not good enough. I quit. Literally, I quit. And then 4 hours later, they came back,
Right.
right? Which is very serendipitous. But there was something about that. And I hope my old employers listen to this. But there was something very serendipitous about having like the guts, because I felt so grounded and secure and like, I will handle it. I will figure it out. I
Right.
know my worth. I know I'm underpaid, which, I mean, was I underpaid? I don't know. But like, I knew that I deserved more.
Right.
And so I took that action. And same thing, even you and I were talking about this earlier, just before we jumped on the podcast. This is another money block for me. I'm working with a guy that I candidly don't like, and he pays me well. Me firing him is actually me shifting another money block. And that block is going to be that I have to somehow struggle to make this amount of money per month from X source. That's not true. That's a worthiness block. So as soon as I fire him, I'm willing to bet. I'm willing to bet, because I've played this game so many times now, that I'm going to get a cash injection from another client who's going to be 10 times better, which is why there's no fear behind it anymore. A little bit of fear.
How many blocks are most of us dealing with? Or it varies?
Yeah. So my process, and I learned from an incredible woman called Thais Gibson, my process, very much rooted in attachment theory, because I just find it so nice and simple to explain things, really identifies that there are about 25 to 30 blocks out there, root cause blocks, right? There are obviously like hundreds of blocks we can have with different nuances and different energetics, but very, if we're kind of really drilling down to the root, there's about 25 to 30. Most people, I will say, have around like 20 of them, and they're wandering around with 20, right? And those blocks are all interconnected and fueling a lot of these very maladaptive behaviors.
So some blocks worse than other blocks. How do you determine the blocks that someone's facing, or is that just from conversation and observance?
Yeah. So my method, because I know the blocks so intimately, and I already know like I kind of know the people I work with. I just even know by I ask them to tell me a little bit about their lives. They share the language that they use, their expressions, even, even kind of just looking at where they're at in their life and the problems they're experiencing. It's pretty fast for me to deduce what the blocks are going to be. I will then clarify those blocks through a series of questions and really drilling down. And within 2 sessions, I will have a full kind of audit. I don't like that term, but an audit of all their blocks.
Now,
And
you have a system, or,
yes, yeah,
I know that, cognitive behavioral therapy,
yeah,
where, you actually, as the patient, have to do work,
hmm
solve a problem.
yeah,
for each one of your blocks, is there a different way to deal with them, to resolve them?
All the blocks can be resolved in the same way, right? The system, the process is the same. And some of it's rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy. Absolutely. I have different levels of subconscious mind rewiring. One of them is very much a cognitive model. The difference, though, is that I'm really, really obsessed with the subconscious mind as opposed to the conscious mind. Because in my experience, having done 15 years of therapy and growing up in the leadership coaching space, if we are just using our conscious mind, aka talking, reading, kind of mentally processing, we're using a tiny fraction of the brain, and we're using one modality. It's like 3 to 5% of our brain. The real magic happens beneath the surface in that subconscious space, which is, for most people, a little bit more scary, a little bit more mysterious, but it doesn't have to be. And one thing I love doing with my clients is actually, because they're intelligent people, teaching them how to master their own subconscious mind, not in a kind of Tony Robbins sense.
Right.
Great. But going deeper, like, actually, how do you do this so that you do not need me? You do not need me. When you are scaling your company, I worked with one guy, I took him from being a chief operating officer of a company to now owning his own business. We've tripled his income. And now I hope he doesn't need me, because he now has the tools. We've gone through that process of tripling his income. He has the tools. He knows what to do.
And
he doesn't need me.
You can replace him. You're
yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, there's so many people who are suffering in the world who are stuck, right? Candidly, I do have clients who don't want to leave me and want to stay, and we figure out a way of making it work that, it's not a burden on them. And then I'm really lucky. I've just got amazing people that I love.
How do you find your clients? They come to you?
They come to me, yeah. It will be a combination of LinkedIn. I actually did the math the other day. I was looking, where are these clients coming from? And it's honestly 50-50 split of LinkedIn and referrals. There's a few who come in through podcasts, but really it's a lot of referrals.
And just out of curiosity, how much, not to be candid about it, but how do you charge?
I have different models. So I've got my asynchronous model for people who maybe they have a budget of less than $3,000 in total. Then I have different ways that I can help them. I've recorded programs, I've recorded retreats where I give them the tools.
Right.
I don't hold back, right? I don't hold back on my IP. I give everyone everything that they need, because I know that half the battle, not even half the battle, people only retain generally like 5% of what they read or listen to. So I can give away all my IP, and it's not necessarily going to do that much, because asynchronous I know doesn't really work, right? So I don't really focus on that. My kind of the two main models that I work with are group work. So I have a very small and intimate group. There's about 5 people in that right now. I consciously keep it small. And that is at a lower investment level.
Sure.
We stay together for 6 months. Everybody gets my curriculum. So I've built a body of work. Think of it like a master's degree in mastering your subconscious mind and fixing all of your relationships and your money blocks, kind of rolled it all into one.
That's a full package.
It's incredibly rich, and I add to it all the time. It's this kind of big volume of work where anytime I do a retreat, anytime I learn something new, develop something new, I just plug it into there, because I know some people really want to nerd out over this stuff, right? And it's lifetime access. So you pay for it and then you have it for life and you can keep learning. So everyone gets that. And then in the group, we have, monthly calls 3 times a month. We have a Telegram channel. Everyone can talk. I also do retreats. We come together a couple times a year and I bring everyone together. It's invite only. I have a lot of clients and I'm very select about who I bring. And then I have my one-on-one. And in terms of the one-on-one, same thing. You get the curriculum and then you choose, it's a minimum 3-month commitment, but you choose if you want to meet with me twice a month, 3 times a month, unlimited times a month. And there's just different pricing tiers and based on your availability. It's very simple.
That's great. And what's your, it's hard to probably put a number on it, but what's your success rate?
Success rate. What do you define as success? Because there's different, I've done the numbers on success in terms of, has this transformed and leveled up your life? Yes, 98%, truly. Like even the guy I'm going to fire, I know it's his psychologist keeps calling me saying, like, you're a miracle worker. I know it works.
So to talk to his psychologist, you needed permission, obviously.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm not billing for those hours. I'm not billing for those hours talking to her.
It's got to be a fascinating conversation.
It is fascinating, yeah. And again, I know I can help him. And at the same time, talking back to the money blocks, I'm at this juncture now where every other client that I have, I genuinely really like. I signed a new client yesterday. I'm so excited to work with him. He's
Great.
awesome. CEO, like
Why
interesting
waste your
guy.
time with someone who you really don't like?
I don't think he likes me either. So you know, to be very
Well,
straight.
it sounds like from our short conversation, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't really know anything about him, but it sounds
Yeah.
like he probably hates women.
Yes, I would say that. Yeah. I
Right.
did. Yeah, I would. Yeah.
And it stems back to his mother and childhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
No,
Absolutely.
right.
Not
See,
not my realm.
I could be in this. I could do
You
this.
could. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Um, Last quick question.
Cool.
What's your opinion on dating sites?
Dating sites. My opinion is they are simply a tool. And same thing with matchmakers. You can, sorry, I have a kitten coming at my leg.
Well, that's
You
okay.
can,
I
you
have to
can,
shut the door or my dog would be in here.
oh, bless him. You can spend every single day on the dating sites. You can pay £250,000 for a year of matchmaking, which I worked with on matchmaker who charges that.
Wow.
It doesn't mean it's going to work. And the reason that it might not work is because of your own subconscious blocks. Remember, your internal wiring will dictate what happens to you externally. So if you are on the apps and you have internal beliefs that, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, I'm going to be rejected, there are no good men in the world, whatever it might be, then it's not going to work for you.
Right.
So that's the piece we need to clear up first. And then by all means, there are strategies for the apps. The apps can absolutely work really well, right? They can work really well. I prefer organic methods, and I very much work on that with my clients. Like, how can we create a life for you where you are able to meet the love of your life pretty much 70% of the day, bar like cleaning your teeth and having a shower. You are available to meet that right person very serendipitously, whether it's in a cafe, at a music festival like I was with my husband, at work, whatever it might be. How can we set you up on an internal level and reorientate your life to just optimize all of these factors so that it can happen quickly and very serendipitously?
That's great. You know what?
Yeah.
A great conversation, Katarina, and I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, there's so many more questions that I had, but we had limited time. But hopefully, you'll be at some point in the future. Maybe you'll come back.
I would love that. I would love it. Yeah, it feels like there's so much more to talk about.
No question about it. But thank you very much. And you're not in the United States, but if you were, I'd wish you a happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, bless. I mean, all my clients are US based, so I'm
So
still
happy
celebrating.
Thanksgiving to them all.
Thank you. You too. You too.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. That's a wrap for this episode of Do You Ever Wonder? Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend, and drop us a review. We'll be back soon with more insights, experts, and conversations that make you think. See you next time. Do you ever wonder where curiosity meets conversation?